said.
Fred was always the leader, wasn't
What
he?
do you think?
I'll fill out their hands as they go. Now,
See, you know about Fred now, he was our leader.
from time to time, I'm gonna be glancing at my little, here's what I'm looking at here, by the way, that's the screen, all right? So if I'm looking at the cameras, I'm just checking to make sure the exposure's right and stuff. I am listening to you, but I may glance and just adjust something. Ignore me as best you can, all right? We're gonna start off. Fred, sir, if for the camera, if you could tell me your full name, when you were born, and where you were born. Whenever you're ready, sir, it's all yours.
Okay. My full name is Alfred Edward Lamari. I was born in Callender, Ontario. Nobody in this room knows who Dr. Defoe was, but that was my doctor. And Dr. Defoe delivered the Dionquin triplets
I was
into the
gonna
world.
say, yeah.
And he was my doctor, my mother's doctor. At that time, my dad had a trade or anything, and he went up to Callender to look for work. And the only place he could find housing was a rabbit hutch. So they converted that into a house to live in, and that's where I was born, in this rabbit hutch.
Where is Callender?
Callender, up in south of North Bay.
Yeah, must have been.
So I was born there on July 27th, 1922. And I started out in life with Dr. Defoe's spoonful of whiskey. That was his favorite. That's what he gave the Dionquin triplets. And each one a spoonful of whiskey to get their heart going.
Isn't that, I didn't know that. Isn't that something?
So that's where I got my start in life. And he told my mother, who was only 15, that he probably won't live the night. I think he was wrong, because I'm still here. But anyway, that was my start in life.
But you somehow ended up in Parry Sound. How'd that happen?
The family moved to Parry Sound because raising a family in a rabbit hutch wasn't exactly the... I don't know how far you want me to go with this story, but...
I'll tell you the truth, as much as you want, I find it fascinating. I mean, don't make yourself feel like you have to shed all the family secrets, but I would imagine living in a rabbit hutch is...
A bed, a table. You cooked over rocks out in front. And I said to my mother, before she died, 2 years before she died, I pumped her because I wanted to write her life history, which I did. So when she was telling me about the day I was born, I said, well, where was the bathroom? She says, a log between two trees. And I said to her, weren't you afraid of somebody coming up when you were out there but over that log? She said, well, the only ones around were the cows, and they didn't seem to care. So that was my beginning. And then we moved to Parry Sound, and from there I went to high school in Parry Sound. I went to school in Parry Sound. And
What kind of, and I know a little bit about your family background, what kind of impact did the Depression have on your family?
what kind? Terrible. I was a very shy kid because we hand-me-down clothes. I didn't know what it was like to have a brand new shirt or a pair of shoes. There was nothing like that. And the house we lived in was an old house. You'd lay in bed at night and the bed bugs would drop down onto your bed. So
I just had a bad encounter with bed bugs in my place in Toronto. They were a pain in the ass in every literal respect of
yeah,
the
well,
word.
we didn't know it till the next morning when there's bites all over
Yeah.
your neck. But that's where we lived, in this one place. And we moved from there down to another place which my mother bought by cleaning a woman's house. She bought it for $500 a month, cleaning this woman's house. And I cut the woman's lawns. And that's between the two of us. We paid for the house. They lived in there for 50 years, and that's where we were living when I joined the Air Force.
Now during the 30s, or later 30s, 37, 38, how tuned in were you to what was starting to heat up overseas, to the developments?
Not at all. No. No, I mean, well, we had a battery-operated radio, which you had to have charged every Saturday night so my dad could listen to the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens playing hockey. Foster Hewitt.
Yeah.
But No, not at all. My playground was the woods in Perry Sound, and that was my playground. That's all I was interested in.
Well, when did the war register in your consciousness?
The only time it registered in my consciousness is when I knew I was approaching 18 years of age, and I knew, this always annoys me when I read in the paper how all Canadians were, they volunteered. That's a crock. You got a piece of paper in the mail saying to report to duty, and that's what I was in. I was in the Air Force, I think, at IT, I think that's where I first met you, Roy, at that initial training at school there. But anyway, I was in there when the notice came in the mail for me to report to Manning Depot, but I was already in the Air Force.
So I don't understand this though, the whole volunteer thing, because of course I've heard this lots and lots. What does it mean then when they say the Canadian Army was a volunteer army?
At start, when the Depression was on, there was no work, and everybody was looking for something to do, so they went and joined the Army or the Air Force, whatever they wanted. But when I seen this coming, I didn't want any part of Army life. I wanted to go to the Air Force. I wanted to learn to fly. So that's why I went down and signed up for the Air Force.
No Navy? Why you couldn't?
No.
Tell me about the Navy and the Army. Why did those not?
So
fit?
that was my choice, was the Air Force. I was fascinated
Did you have?
by the fact that I go up there and fly around.
My big problem is I have a big mouth and I interrupt because I get excited with details. So you got to forgive me. Did you have any relatives who seen
No.
service?
No.
So you were
Well,
really.
my dad was in the Army
You ever talk about it?
when he got too much to drink, but then you couldn't believe him.
Yeah. That's terrific. Thank you very much, sir. So I'll be back to you shortly.
Fred.
All right, Fred, sir. Roy, can I talk to you for a moment?
Yes, you can.
Can you tell me your full name for the video record, when you were born and where you were born?
Yeah, I'm Roy William Kent, and I was born in Sarnia on December 11, 1917.
What did your dad do?
Excuse me?
What did your father do?
My father was a foreman at the Imperial Oil Refinery.
What was life like in Sarnia in the 1920s?
Well, I'll tell you, the first part of the 20s, it was pretty nice, because coming up to 29, you were in the full breadth of the inflation. Everybody had money, everybody had jobs, but suddenly everything collapsed in the 30s, the early 30s. Many people in Sarnia lost their jobs, and fortunately my father still maintained his job, but there were a lot of people who didn't have work. It was, of course, I was in high school growing up. One pair of pants, one pair of pajamas, this sort of thing. It was pretty serious. The early 30s were something that people today really don't understand at all, because people were out of work in Sarnia, and people were, it was just a tough time.
My dad's name is Blake too. He grew up in Toronto, but a lot of his friends called him Sam. I could never figure out why. He finally explained it to me one day. He said he had hand-me-down pants for his father, and they were too long.
That's
And there was this song, Sam, they got your pants too long. So he was known as Sam his whole life because he wore hand-me-down pants that were too long, because he had one pair of pants.
You got your father's pants or somebody else's, and they cut them off at the bottom and sewed them up, and But I mean, we all made it through it. So,
Now, what did you do when you graduated high school?
well, I'll tell you, when I went to high school, I graduated from public school, and I only weighed 85 pounds, and I was 11 years old. And my first year in high school, I thought I'd try to go out for the football team and that sort of thing. And they said, "Hey, you're too little. You can't do anything like that." So I thought, well, what can I do? Well, it turns out that we had a wonderful gym teacher there, A.R. Mendezabal. And they allowed you to stay in high school after, like I could stay there till 4:30, 5 o'clock at night, and I got into gymnastics. And being a little guy like that, see, it enabled me to build my body up and all that sort of thing. And of course, I got to be on the gym team with, well, Jack Thane was one of the guys. He was a tail gunner that shot down in the war. And A.R. Mendelsohn's son, Rudolfo, was on the junior gym team with me. He got shot down in India. And but I was able to develop, just as a little kid. And then I went out and played football, and I played basketball, and but you see, you think maybe it's a tough way to go, but then it's good for you because you develop yourself in a way that you wouldn't have had normally, because this way I was working in the gym every night. In the high school at that time, they allowed you to stay until like 7. We would stay there until maybe like 7 o'clock at night, After we got out at 4:30, you go down to the gym and you work out, high bar, parallel bars, and the whole thing, you see. And so that enabled me to be more adaptable, I guess you would call it. And of course, then I won. I get into boxing and wrestling, and as a matter of fact, when I was a junior, I don't like to. This sounds like BS, but when I was the junior, I was the high school champion, athletic champion, when I was a junior at high school. They used to have a thing in the Sarnia Collegiate, it was called the Kenny Cup, and it went to the best all-around athlete in the school. And I won that as a junior.
And it was all because these guys, these teachers, or this one teacher, arranged it that you guys could use the facilities after hours.
Yeah, after school. You see, we'd go down and stay down to school right there. And they kept the school open for us. We were able to work out, do everything, work in the high bar, parallel bars, the mats, everything. And so we were fortunate,
What a real blessing.
Yeah. And of course, then I was well, I started to be boxing and wrestling, and that's how I won the all-around school championship when I was a junior, because I competed in, I won my weight in boxing and won my weight in wrestling, and then I went on from there.
I failed gym, just for the record. So when you graduated, what did you do with yourself? What were your plans?
Well, I'll tell you, when I graduated, I was 29. Things were great. The stories, things fell apart, and it was really tough. So I got a job as I went down and got little odd jobs working, helping to load the freighters that used to come in. We got 25 cents an hour. I worked at the elevator, got 25 cents an hour, that sort of thing. But then I was playing junior football, and I was able to make some contacts, and they took me to the University of Western Ontario on a football scholarship to play football at Western. So I played at Western for the few years that we had in the championship years that we had there. So.
Did you take classes when you were there?
Classes at Western?
Yeah.
I went to school at Western, University of Western Ontario, and graduated there.
And what time would that have been that you graduated? Kind of 33, 34?
No, that was 39.
Oh, so it took you right through.
So let's see. No, I'm mixed up. Let's see. Well,
The dates really
that doesn't really matter.
They really don't matter.
Yeah.
Were you particularly aware, for instance, of the war coming on before war was declared?
Well, the thing was that, you see, I have a brother that's 2 years younger than me. It was Eric. And when the war was declared, it was when Churchill made his speech. We were we will fight, on the, all that stuff. Well, then these young guys in Sarnia, they all went down and joined the armies. My brother Eric joined, and he faked his age. He was only 16, but he got in at 17, and of course, then me being in school, here's my young brother in the army and everything, and of course we thought, well, the war is only a temporary thing. It's it's going to last any time. But then, as the years went by, we realized that it was a much more serious thing than most everybody had figured. And so I just realized then that, that I had to do something also, and so I went down and joined the Air Force.
Now, why not the Army like Eric?
Well, because I was doing all this stuff on the high bar, working out as a gymnast and all that sort of thing. And, it was kind of, you look up in the air and see these airplanes flying around. And of course we had the stories with a couple of Dave Harding was a World War I pilot. His family just lived down the street from where I lived on Proctor Street, and he was like a World War I kind of hero sort of guy, and so those things affected you as a youngster. And as I say, I just wanted to get up in the air and fly instead of being on the ground.
Now, I'm trying to get a rough idea. So you enlisted probably around 40, 41, would that be right?
Did what?
I'm trying to figure out the year you enlisted. It sounds like it might have been 40 or 41.
Yeah, that was when it was. It was 1940, either 40 or 41. I'm not.
The Churchill speech was 40, so I'm guessing it
Is that what
was
it was? It was
thereabouts
after
or
that.
after.
It probably was 41.
All right. That's excellent, sir. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Jack.
I'm listening.
Jack, I wonder if you could tell me, for the video record, like these other kind fellows have done. Let me get my cheat sheets here. If you could tell me your full name, when you were born, and where you were born, sir. Whenever you're ready, it's all yours.
My name's Jack Deacon Corey. I was born September the 4th, 1921. I was born right here in Stratford. The reason my second name is Deacon, that was the name of the doctor that delivered me.
That was often, I find, a kind of a gratuity, if you will, that families paid to the delivering doctor.
Evidently.
What was Stratford like in the 20s?
Well, I was born in 1921. I don't remember the first early years, except as a kid we'd play out in the road and wait for the horses to go by to drop our puck, and it'd get frozen and that way. But my father worked in the furniture factory, and it was very rough times for them at that time. My mother died when I was 4 years old. I was the youngest of three boys. I had a younger sister. So my father raised as the best he could. It was pretty tough going at that time. And what should I say?
Well, I must have been awful tough going for you as a 4-year-old, for God's sakes.
It wasn't easy, no. It was harder for my sister. But anyhow, we managed, and I lived with an aunt and uncle for a while in Toronto during the Depression, and came back to Stratford again to finish some education. Unfortunately, during the Depression, I didn't get too good of an education. I quit high school after second grade in high school to get a job to help support the family. And by that time it was getting on. My oldest brother joined the Air Force, and I idolized my oldest brother, and that's the reason I joined the Air Force. And my other brother joined the Air Force. So there was 3 of us in the Air Force.
Were they all in the same type of area? Were they in heavy bombers, or did they go in different directions?
No. My brother decided he wanted to be a wireless op, so he joined as that. And doing the fact, then when I joined the same trade. My other brother tried to join the same trade, but he was colorblind, so he ended up in ground crew.
Did they all make it through?
No, my oldest brother was killed.
Well, maybe at some point you might tell me a bit about that. I won't press you for it now.
No.
Are you pleased that you chose the Air Force in retrospect?
Well, I'll be honest, I was no hero. I knew that the Army was going to draft me. I wanted to do the same thing my brother had done, so I joined the Air Force. Yes, I was pleased, yes.
I have a good friend who died just last year, Clem Pierce, in Toronto, who was aircrew, and he joined because he was at home alone. His folks were up at a cottage. They were a fairly well-off family. Clem was 16, and his brother Basil was killed in aircrew over Europe, and he went out and enlisted that day to fight, much to the distress of his mother. He got in underage, lied about his age, and he went for revenge. I think a number of guys went for revenge.
Well, I wouldn't say I went for revenge. I was out in Calgary Wireless School just graduating when my brother was killed. He was one of the first boys to join up from Stratford, and so he was in the tough part of the war.
The worst part, really, for aircrew. Well, thank you very much, sir.
Fine.
Lee, it's your turn. I'm just going to do a little bit of a camera adjustment here. Now, you kind of know the drill now. If you could tell me, for the video record, your full name, when you were born and where you were born, sir.
Lee Park Morgan. I was born under unusual circumstances in Amherstburg, Ontario. My father and my mother were living in Monroe, Michigan, and they came across to Amherstburg because her father was a doctor. So I was delivered in Amherstburg, and my grandfather put my paperwork in as a Canadian, so I artificially became a Canadian, but was really living in Monroe, Michigan. And you wonder why I liked the Air Force? My father was in the First World War. He was a flyer, flew stopped with camels and scouts. He was flying out of Monroe Airport at that time I was born. My father was killed in 1929, an airplane crash in Pocatello, Idaho, where we were living. And we came back to live in Amherstburg. After my father was killed, my grandfather was a doctor. 1930s were not bad for me. My grandfather was a doctor. I would say relatively wealthy compared to what other people had. I saw the riots in the streets of the 1932s, and I was still only a boy of 6 or 7 years old when that stuff went on.
What riots in the streets? I'm not sure I know
Well,
what you speak of.
People had no food, and they had no money, and they had no way of getting food. My grandfather was mayor of the town as well as a doctor. So they came to our house, large groups of them, and they threw stones through the windows and broke windows, and they were really trying to find some way to get the people, the city council and so forth, to do something to help them. And to my knowledge, Amherstburg was one of the first towns in Canada to have a system of relief to help the poor people. But it was that riot that happened that created it. After my grandfather died, my mother remarried again in the late 30s, and I came to live in the Toronto area. It so happens we were camping on some islands up near Britt in the Georgian Bay area when the war broke out. We didn't know the war had even broke out till about a month after it happened, because we were on these remote islands. I don't know why I joined the Air Force when I did. I was 17 when I joined. I went down to the recruiting depot on Bay Street in Toronto, and I told him I wanted to join the Air Force, and the fellow said, "You don't have sufficient and you're too young to join the Air Force." And I said, "Well, I want to be an air gunner." He said, "I doubt if you'd even make that." So when I joined the Air Force, and Jack and the others will tell you, you went through a process. Everybody wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be nothing but a gunner. And consequently, I didn't go through all what people went through to become whatever they did in aircrew. I was a gunner right from the beginning. which was kind of an unusual situation.
It's very unusual. I mean, Clem Pierce, who I just spoke of, joined as a gunner because he wanted to get in quick because he wanted his revenge. But it's few and far between. Everybody wanted the goggles and the silk scarves. Why did you want to be an air gunner?
Age. I knew that I couldn't, that they weren't going to take a 17-year-old into air crew other than as a gunner.
Now, that's one thing I forgot to get. Could you give me your date of birth?
15th of June, 1925.
You
When
were a
I-
boy, just a baby.
When I joined, my mother had to sign a paper for me. It was in the fall of 1942. I actually didn't get called up until the spring, early spring of 1943. So it wasn't very long from the time I actually went in the Air Force till I was overseas. Wasn't even a year. Joined in May 43, and I was sitting in England in December 44, or 43. I met these guys in 44.
How did your mom feel about you joining up?
I think she was resigned to it. My brother was in the military. He was already overseas. But he joined the Army. He couldn't join the Air Force because he had a broken eardrum. And you couldn't fly if you had a broken eardrum. I don't think she had any idea of what really was taking place. I don't think she was knowledgeable about the services or the military. I mean, she knew her husband had flown. I don't know whether she had a fear because of flying or not, but I've always known about flying.
You liked it when you started flying?
But remember, I was flying when I was a little boy,
Yeah.
4 and 5 years old. I was in an I can remember being in airplanes with my mother and my brother in airplanes.
Boy, that's something rare, I'll tell you. I've never heard anybody else have that experience.
My father had a vintage bomber from the First World War with a great big huge front cockpit. And my mother and myself would get in the front cockpit and I would sit on her knee while we were flying.
And that's something.
Yeah,
And you loved it.
yeah.
I forgot to ask you, Jack, how did your family feel about you enlisting?
Well, as I said, I only had a father. Times were tough. I don't know really how he felt. Very, very sad, I suppose. His 3 boys were all gone in the Air Force. He was left alone. But I guess at that age I really didn't give it much consideration, to tell you the truth.
It's funny what kids will do, even though their parents are begging them not to.
That's right.
When did you enlist? What year, do you remember?
Yeah, I enlisted in September of 42.
Could you possibly get me a glass of water? Give you a buck. My grandfather, I'm going to pause the camera just for a second.
In the Signal Corps and at Vimy Barracks.
Was he? I keep asking people who are at Vimy. My dad was there so long, and no one remembers my dad. And only recently have I met a few guys who actually knew my grandfather in London, but there's so many people who have passed through, I guess. And most people at Vimy didn't stay long.
No, he was with 27th Tank,
Was he?
Sherbrooke Fusiliers, so
Oh, gee, I knew a lot of the Sherbrooks.
he went ashore D-Day with the Sherbrooks when they went ashore.
Wow.
And very badly wounded at Falaise Gap. And remember, he was a Signal Corps, he was the repairman for the 27th Tank.
Way you go.
It is okay?
You're recording, but we're going to record you walking across the room.
You should have been streaking.
Yeah.
Who did that again?
Roy, how did your family feel about you when you enlisted?
Well, I don't think they were too happy, but of course my younger brother was already in there and they figured that. But I guess they realized that they needed all we young guys, you know. And so they being English, they really didn't object. Of course, I guess I wouldn't have paid any attention anyway. Because, you know, all the young guys then, everybody wanted to join. And of course, if you really got feeling wasn't there where you're going to have an opportunity to fly, you know, when this was kind of one of your dream things as you were a kid, well, why not join the Air Force? I mean, and so there were a couple of reasons really. It was not only to protect your country, it was kind of to help the feelings that you had yourself about wanting to get up in the air and, you know, and you know, do that sort of thing.
And that would override any parental concerns, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, they, my family didn't know anything about me going down to, but then it was, you know, it was my choice, so.
And I think about your poor mother, Fred, because she must have depended on you in terms of income and everything else. Did she ever speak to you about how she felt about you joining up?
All the time. But of course, I'm like Roy. I wanted to go up there in the wild blue, and I didn't care whether she liked it or not. And then when I used to get the concerns about, if you go over there, you're liable to be killed. And my answer was, well, I'm the one that's going to be killed. Why should you worry? I mean, that's the attitude I had. But when you get a family of your own, you don't have that attitude. But then you do, because I want to go up there.
Yeah. I remember Barney Danson saying to me, he said, you know, we were in the infantry, we all figured, you know, we were for it. We were walking right into the enemy. Our odds weren't so hot. But we figured, oh, well, you know, our parents would be a bit sad, but what the hell? I mean, it just didn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
Because when you're that age, who the hell cares?
Are you into the related stories yet?
Yes, I am. I just broadened up so you're all in the camera now, so I'm going to talk openly now. Thank you very much. You were terrific in giving me the individual stuff.
I want to give you a little story about this guy here.
Yes, I'm all ears.
Yeah. The first night we went out on a heavily defended target. This hick from Parry Sound had no idea what the hell he was up against. So anyway, as we were approaching the target from my ringside seat, I looked at that sky ahead there. My mouth was so dry that I couldn't have licked a postage stamp if my life would depend on it, and the palms of my hand were soaking wet. So I looked at that and I thought, geez, you can't even put your hand up there without it getting blown off. So I said to Roy, Roy, maybe we should go to one side of that mess up there, drop these damn things and get the hell out of here. Roy was small in stature, but he was a bulldog in doing things. I'm going to do it. And he said to me, he says, nope, we came here to do a job, and we're going to do it. So under my breath, I said, damn it all, Roy, if you can do it, I can do it. And that's how I got my courage for the other 31 trips.
Tell me, you guys, about how you crew up. I have some idea of what the procedure was. It always is slightly mystical because it was just go find somebody.
This guy right here will tell you. I don't know how he did it.
Where was the crewing up? Where did the crewing up take place?
Number 24 OTU at Long Marston.
Now you'd obviously been moved up there from Bournemouth.
Honeybourne first, eh? But we didn't crew up in Honeybourne.
No.
We crewed up 24 OTU at Honeybourne, and then we moved over to 24 OTU's branch subsidiary at Long Marston.
For those of us who are a little dim, explain how the crewing up process
It's all
happened.
Roy's fault.
I'm afraid, Roy, I'm going to have to get you to start this.
Well, I'll tell you, I started out with, you know, you're all a group of guys, they put you all together, like in classes and that sort of thing, and so you get to know the other people and, you have some relationship with them. And of course I found out with Fred that he had been to flying school, but he hadn't made it through as a pilot. He'd transferred over to be a bomb member, but he had graduated, you know. And so I thought, well, you know, a bomb aimer, if something happened to me as a pilot, and the bomb aimer was so capable of being able to handle a wheel and you know, that sort of thing, that it would be a good idea to have somebody like us as a spare pilot. So that's why I said, well, hey, you know, I got a hold of him. So you want to be in my crew, and so that's how he came to be part of our crew. And of course then, he as a bomber, I was able to, on our training missions and that sort of thing, I was able to get him up from the bomber seat and get him up and sit in the cope with. See, a Lancaster we never used a co-pilot, but there was a co-pilot seat there. So he could sit there, and I gave him instructions on flying, so he could, I figured, well, you know, if the plane was so flyable and I was killed, well, possibly he could bring it back to England. I knew he couldn't land it, but at least they could all jump out over it.
You get low enough, they can just pile out the
Yeah,
time.
go and get there, and so they could get back. That's how we.
The rest of us could just jump out.
You didn't worry about me.
So
No.
that's how.
Now, I'm struck by something, and maybe this is the relative to the OTUs, that you guys are all basically from Southern Ontario. How much apart was geographic? Was that just coincidence, or was that commonplace?
Yeah, it was just coincidence.
All coincidence.
But I think really, if you can check the records, we tried to check them, and I think we did partially get them checked, but never totally. That we were the only crew, like in 419, that the only all-Ontario crew. Our crew, most of the people were, some of the guys from out west and, you know, from the Maritimes or wherever, but we were all from Ontario, the whole crew.
Well, Roy, if I can interject, you also picked Bill on account of he was from Sarnia,
Yeah,
the same as you. Is that
yeah.
not correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Did,
Yeah, Bill Jarvis, our navigator, he was from Sarnia, so that was close to home. You know, good navigator, graduated high in his class, and all that sort of thing. So you know, when you're picking a crew, you kind of you check those things out.
Had any of you guys crossed paths in like ETS or the early stages of initial flying training in Canada, etc., or was this the first time you guys actually set eyes on each other?
that's right.
Well, the mid-upper gunner and I
Oh, I'm
were
sorry.
kids together. So we knew each other.
Tell me how the crew is assembled. Roy starts.
Roy made all the decisions.
So he starts. Who do you start with? Do you start with the bomber or the navigator?
Well, nowhere in particular, but for example, now with the two gunners, you see, I got to know that they were the top of their class. You see, both Moon and Morgan were the top of their class. One was a mid-upper gunner and the other was a tail gunner.
They told you that.
Well, we haven't told you how we picked old Jack, though.
So I believed them, and I thought, well, hey, you know, it'd be a pretty good idea to have the two top gunners in your Lancaster, you know. So that's how we got those. And of course, Jack he was way up in his class, and we had such a nice, available, smiling, happy sort of a guy and everything. Hell, it's nice to have somebody like that in your crew too. And of course with Fred, he'd had the background, as I was saying before, of some basic flying that I thought that possibly, you know, under certain circumstances, he might be able to fly that plane back, or never landed, as I said. But
Pointer in the right direction.
When we were talking together, there was Fred and Bill and Roy, and they were talking to me, and they asked me if I knew another gunner, and I told them about Forbes, and he said, oh, he'd heard about Forbes, and we were looking for a wireless operator, and there's Jack standing by himself, being very quiet, and this is Jack. He's not a forward person. He's very quiet, standing by himself. So Roy knew something about his record, so Roy said, go over and ask him if he's been picked by a crew yet. So I went over and I said, have you been flying with anybody yet? And he said, no. I said, would you be interested in talking to Roy? So he walked across with us to talk to Roy. That's how that all come about.
Strangers in the night.
Yeah.
Silent glances across the room.
I found it peculiar too that I don't know about the rest of you fellas. None of us, as far as I'm concerned, ever talked about our feelings, how you felt. Never. I don't ever remember anybody saying, "Hey, was you out last night? Were you scared?" Or
Through the whole
nothing.
tour.
Yeah. No, I don't ever remember anyone ever talking about it.
We didn't talk.
I don't remember it.
Well, I gotta pause there because I gotta swap tape. So everybody stretch your legs, get a glass of water, have a bathroom call. I'll open the door, get a bit of fresh air in, and I'll pick it up from.
I'd like to put something in there.
You bet. Give me a
we-
second here. I just gotta do my run in. Let me ask you something here. I'm having a bit of a problem with the light. Sheet that this way. Does that bother anybody?
No, as long as you don't look at it.
I confess I didn't do it.
Like just giving you a little bit sharper color. All right.
Okay.
Away you go, sir.
It's always fascinated me, even to this day, how the hell we left a little piece of land north in northern England on the Scottish border, way into Germany, and come back with the weather reports that were available at the briefing room. But damn it all, they can't even give you accurate weather reports today with all their fancy equipment. But sitting in that room was Jack and Bill. They got us there and back. How? I don't know.
What baffles me is with the primitive equipment you're working with half the time.
Exactly.
Too.
How did they do it? I don't know, because I know damn well that if Jack picked up his intercom and he said, "Hey, Adolf, I'm lost. Can you tell me where we are?" I don't think he'd have got very much of a response. So we were flying in the dead of night. You know, you couldn't see the ground. You couldn't have no markers, nothing to see. So you have to ask Jack how the hell he got us there and back. I don't know, because Roy can fly it there, but he's got to have directions too. And flying an airplane isn't much different than a boat. It's affected by airspeed and wind direction, and if you don't have those things, you're in trouble.
Now, as I said, I'm weak on names. I'm trying to remember the Jarvis boy's dad's name. Is it Bill?
Bill.
All right, good. And he was the navigator.
He was a navigator.
All right, may I pick it up again from where we were?
Okay.
You surprised me, sirs, when you say you never spoke about your operation, your missions. So let me come back to that by starting to say, how was it when you were on, I guess, heavy conversion training, all that operational training, the stuff just prior to actually going into ops? How was it mustering down as a crew? How was it? How did it feel? What were the tricks? What were the problems you ran into getting used to each other's quirks and personalities to get that plane running as a tight unit? Or was there anything that happened?
Everybody was very good at what they did. That really was the secret, wasn't it, Roy?
I would say so.
Everybody was good.
You know, you didn't think anything else except to think positive. You never thought you were going to get killed or anything like that. You go out there, you get the plane ready, got your bombs ready, you're going to do a good job, you knew what you had to do. And you thought about all those soldiers down there and after the invasion where all these Canadians were out there with the Germans all lined up shooting at them all the time, and here we are up there, you know, going along like this. So you had a job to do, and so you just said, well, I'm going to do it, you know.
But in the early days, I mean, you're doing circuits and bumps. You're still getting used to the personality of the airplane. How, and I know there are accidents in those damn things,
Yeah.
in those training exercises.
We better clarify that, Blake. On the circuit and bumps, it was only Roy and I that was doing it. They wouldn't take a plane off the ground without a wireless hop aboard. So the other ones, they were having a beer in the mess while Roy and I were, while he was practicing circuits and bumps and I was in the plane with him. So
these guys were larking about, having a
that's
having
right.
a pint
That's
somewhere.
right. They don't know what circuits and bumps are.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
I am too.
The circuits and bumps were in the beer hall.
The other thing you got to keep in mind here that they're responsible for the problem, not us. I mean, the tail gunner doesn't take the plane off and land it. Mid upper gunner has nothing to do. Well, we have a pilot and a co-pilot of sorts, so he should have been along for his training program. But the rest of us didn't matter.
Well, as you start getting more serious about getting close to flying operations and into operations, how can you really muster down as a crew if you're not really talking much about it? Or just You didn't talk about how you felt. Is that what it was? How do you sort out things that went right, things that went wrong? Did you kind of do that informally? Was it formal when you were debriefed?
I don't ever remember talking to Roy about what I was going to do.
The thing is, if
You know, if I went down someplace for an exercise, a flying exercise, like we flew down to southern England to take on some sea fires. Remember that, Roy?
Mhm.
And they had cameras. And the big thing was our camera showing that we did a better job than the other guys. And really, everybody always did well whatever they did, so we didn't get called into the office and say you're doing something wrong, or Fred never get called in and complained about his bombing, or we just didn't get any calls like that. Nobody ever took us to task in the squadron.
The scariest we had when we were sent out on the Valley Gap.
Yeah.
And when we're in their briefing room, they handed me a stopwatch. And I was to set the bomb sights on the coast, and push the button. And so many seconds after that, we'd be at the proper target. Well, I had still had time on my stopwatch when I said, hey, they're dropping behind us. And Leeds said, they're dropping behind us, bombs. They were dropping in the wrong spot. And I still had time. Well, I let my stopwatch run out, and that was where the target was. Well, when they pulled us into the briefing room, when we come back, and madder than hell because we had bombed the wrong target. We didn't know it because when they opened the bomb bays, the cameras operated, so they knew whether we were on the right target or not.
We didn't drop them in the wrong place.
I was going to say, it doesn't make sense to me. You dropped them in the right place, obviously.
We had to. Because
We had to. We were it was only one Lancaster dropped them in the wrong place.
What kind of contact did you have with other crews?
None did we? Did you have contact with other crews?
In the air, part of my job was we'd listen to the Pathfinder. You know, a lot of people are in the conception that we saw the targets. A lot of times we never saw the targets. We were bombing flares. If they changed the flares in the middle of the bombing run, why, we were notified of that. But outside of talking to the other crews, we didn't talk to anybody else. At least I didn't. Did you? No.
Was there any kind of talk on the aircraft, on the intercom, or is that a kind of verboten?
Yeah, where's Moon's money hidden?
The night we went out, we lost 2 engines, and Roy had a conference with the crew, and the crew all asked him the same question. Can you fly this damn thing with only 2 engines? And Roy said, yes, I think I can, but if you lose another one, you better get your parachutes on. But that was the only time I remember a conference.
What was
well, that part of part of that though was with when we lost. When you go on a bombing trip, you have a scheduled hour when you're supposed to arrive. Each plane, each guy's got H hour plus 1 or whatever it might be. So you're assigned a time when you're supposed to bomb, starting from the time of when the Pathfinder's bombs have gone down. You see, so and you're coming in from all different areas, like coming from this aerodrome, from that aerodrome, and what you're doing is gradually getting to a line like this, based upon the altitude that you've been given to fly, to bomb from, which might be from, say, from 9,000 feet up to, say, 16,000 feet. And each 500 foot of level is supposedly to be an airplane go over at H hour plus 1. So this is theory, and this is the way it's supposed to be. So you would have, see, that stack of planes would be here at H hour plus 1. They would all release their bombs. 1 minute later, there's supposed to be a stack of planes like that at the same level. And they were supposed to drop their bombs until the whole thing was over. But that was, that's the way it's designed. But it's an impossible sort of a thing to do at night, to be in that exact position. And of course, when you're flying in to a target area, say in Germany or wherever, your planes are out here, you're out here. This the point where you come together. So you're coming like this, you see. Then you're supposed to be lined up like this at these heights that I was just giving you to go across, and you have to set exact time when your bombs are supposed to be released, you see. Of course, as I said, it's an impossible sort of thing to have that be perfect, you know. But that's the way it was.
What staggers me about that is you're doing it in radio silence, and obviously guys can get whacked out of the stream. How do you maintain any kind of an order when you're basically relying on preset timings and schedules?
That's why I'm saying it was not perfect.
And it's nighttime. What can you see at night?
Yeah.
300, 400 yards, that's as far as you can see.
Yeah.
Plus you've got anti-aircraft shells coming up and they're bursting all around you. And of course I don't know whether you're familiar like with the anti-aircraft. There was two types of the 40 millimeter anti-aircraft that the German used came up to like to 14, 15, I think it maybe even went to possibly to 20,000 feet. But those were single explosive shells that just went boom, like, and a whole big splatter of shrapnel came out from. Now the other ones were 20 millimeter aircraft, which were like in groups, and they went up like somebody holding a hose, and the sky would be full of all these bullets with tracer. There'd be a tracer bullet in between, you see, which gave you the trajectory of where these anti-aircraft shells were coming towards you. The other ones, as I said, were 40 millimeter. They just exploded with a big white flash like that, you see. And this is the stuff that rattled off your plane. Like we had our windscreen blown out with an explosion like that, you see, before we were going in on a bombing run. And then you get little holes through the wings of your plane. Hopefully they don't go through your gas tanks and that sort of thing. So you had a lot of people don't realize that there were two kinds of shells that were being fired at you all the time, you know.
And you know what I can't begin to fathom is, especially you as a pilot, is flying into basically this kind of this cone of fireworks of fire, and knowing that, well, I guess Fred alluded to it, the best thing to do is to fly straight into it, no point in zigzagging.
That's it. You had no point in zigzagging. There was a thought, excuse me.
The only other thing that on Kiel we had those rockets firing at us.
Yeah.
That's the first time we saw rockets.
What kind of rockets? Like from
They were air-to-air rockets being fired at us.
That was in the latter part. So the early they didn't have them, but they did have them.
That would be August of '44. Anyhow, they were different altogether. See rockets coming through the air. We weren't versed with them.
How do you develop the what's the word I'm looking for, the nerve, or control your nerves when you first start flying into that flak? I mean, everybody I've spoken to who was flying and saw it, I mean, on some level it rattled them, just because there's such a hell of a lot of it. And you see other planes going down, you might see somebody in a chute that's caught fire or Roman candling.
In the few daylights in the few daylight raids that we had, you would see this, but of course you didn't see the chutes at night. But you know the anti-aircraft fire and the searchlights. But that was one of the things I think nobody has seemed to have spoken about. The searchlights were one of the worst things. The Germans had like a base of like 12 searchlights, beams that come like this. There was one in there that would, there was a specific one that waved back and forth like this. If you felt that go across your plane, which was like a bright light would go across, then these other 12 from that anti-aircraft battery below would concentrate on you. That one searchlight would hook like that and they would get you. That was what we called being coned. And then the anti-aircraft fire would concentrate on the concentration of those searchlights, and they'd blow you right out of the sky like that. You see, if you're coned. So, as a pilot, you had to be extremely ready that when that light went across you like that, that you had to flick over that way, you know.
Did a corkscrew real
You
hard.
had a corkscrew right out of it, yeah. And you had to do it immediately, or else these other guys were all on you, and you were blown out of the sky. That's
Which we did one night. I don't know how Lee felt back there when you pulled it out of that dive, but anyway.
We went into, he's making a tight turn to the right or left, I can't remember which way it is, and losing altitude at the same time very rapidly. So he's coming down from, I don't know, 20,000 or 15,000 feet, and he's coming down, and he's coming pretty low to the ground, although we don't see no ground. But he's got to pull out. Well, the tail is a hell of a long way from center of gravity. And I'll tell you how bad the G's were. It cracked perspex in my turret.
Wow.
see, a thing there relative to airplanes that a lot of people don't really, well, they just don't know about that. With the Lancaster, when you got into a tight turn, the tighter you got, then the tighter it would get, and then and you'd be going like this, tighter and tighter and tighter in the small circle. And when it got to a certain point, you couldn't pull it out. I mean, you were done. So you had to, I mean, you could feel it when you're flying, you know, when you're going around the circle, where the limit was, where you had to, and it took all your strength really to pull it out of what we called, that was a corkscrew, we called it a corkscrew, but a corkscrew could take your right arm down, and you'd have no, after a certain point, there was no control that you had on that plane.
Now, when you were pulling out a corkscrew like that, would you then try to reverse the corkscrew in a different direction? Or
Well,
would
what
you
you did was just try to get out of it. You're just struggling to get
He's
it.
diving into the ground is exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, and you couldn't do it. You couldn't pull it up like this. You had to do it just very gently, see, or else it would tear the wings off. Because by this time you built up a terrific airspeed, you see, going down. So that was, it's one of the little things that could be very difficult.
I'd like to hear some stories about your worst missions, about the missions you remember the most, about some of the strange experiences you had looking at the no man's land at the tail end of that aircraft, which is a dirty job. Anything you guys remember in no particular order. I'd love to hear any stories you can remember about.
Yeah, and there's nothing bad about looking out the back. Because you've already been there. You've already been there. I mean,
But I'm thinking you're sitting there and you're scouring the skies looking for night fighters, and I don't know. It strikes me as being
visibility. You have to have a tail gunner and a mid-upper gunner. A mid-upper gunner controls what's above him, and the tail gunner is back and generally below. And no plane can attack you unless he flies a curve of pursuit. He cannot attack you unless he flies that curve, and he can't shoot you down until he shoots in front of you.
I'm not following you. Can you
Okay, well,
explain
he's got to
this?
lead you.
All right.
It's like shooting at a clay pigeon. You're flying along like this, and I want to shoot at that clay pigeon. He's got to turn with you. So he's flying a curve. And if you see him before he sees you or before he shoots, he cannot shoot you down. Isn't that right, Roy? He can't. He can't.
Hopefully.
He can't. Because I tell Roy what to do. You know, I tell Roy, you turn in this corkscrew left or right, port or starboard. I would tell Roy, and if he turned the plane in the direction I told him, and he would tell me what he's doing, because I wouldn't know what the hell he's doing. I'd feel things happening, but I wouldn't know. As long as that fighter he couldn't shoot you down.
Something I understand. I mean, you got a long flight. Some of these missions I would think be 6, 7, 8 hours. Would that be?
Generally 6.
8 hours,
6
8
to
and a
8.
quarter one.
What the hell do you do? You can't smoke.
Better not.
Oh, you could.
Better not let me catch you smoking.
You could.
What do you do for food? Where do you go to the bathroom? How do you keep yourself alert?
That's a story that's worth telling. We had a system. God help the guy that decided to go to the bathroom. We had what we call this round pail. What was it called? Nissen pail or
Yeah,
something?
the back.
It was a round pail like that. And it was real about that high. And it was funnel shaped. It's funnel shaped so what was in there couldn't come out.
Splendid idea.
Hopefully.
Splendid idea. And the idea was catch one of these guys up front coming down to the back because he had to go. And they would tell me, and I would tell Roy, about time, Roy, you just let the nose, pull the nose up and let her drop. I can't remember who it was.
Go like that with this wheel, flop it like that, and the guy back there in the cab's he's got a problem.
He's looking at where he just deposited it.
He'd take off. He'd actually lift off the pot. It was a dramatic sight. I don't know who we caught, but we did catch a couple of guys.
But believe me, Blake, we didn't do that when we're on a mission.
No.
Those are just practice.
You just
Blake.
kept it in your
When
pants.
you were on a mission, you didn't leave your place, and
Nope.
you never used it. We went for 6-8 hours, and
No.
Now, was fatigue ever a concern, Jack? Was it ever a worry? Did it ever undo you?
was the what?
Fatigue, did that ever, was
Not
that ever
really.
a problem?
Never seemed to bother me. Can't speak for the others, but
No.
you seem to be alert all the time.
Better be.
I was a wireless op. I had a snooze once in a while if there was nothing doing, but
He's listened to Lily Marlene, you see.
Yeah, you put
Not
some good
very
music
often.
on, Jack.
That's something I heard I didn't understand. Sometimes the wireless ops would tune in a
Yeah, right.
radio station and pipe some music through the
That's
aircraft.
right, you did.
Why not?
Yeah. Some good music.
I don't recall ever doing that for you, did I, Roy?
Yes, you did.
Did I?
Well, I
Okay.
didn't hear it, but
No. But
You see, generally, when you're flying, the wireless operator has his job to listen to the radio, and navigator's in his little compartment. He doesn't know what the hell anybody else is doing. Bombardier's up there sleeping beside Roy, who's doing all the work. And the mid-upper gunner and the tail gunner, they got to keep alert. They can't go to sleep.
So it's really Fred had the cushy job, is what you're saying here.
Yeah.
Well, Fred, and the navigator, and yeah.
I think in fairness, the navigator, he didn't have too cushy a job. I'll tell you, trying to keep us on course.
No, believe me, I was speaking facetiously.
Yeah.
I did speak to one nav who I think I was telling somebody I've forgotten, poked his head up through the mid-upper turret and saw all this flak and stuff and said, I'm never doing that again. And hid, the rest of his tour hid behind his curtain. Just,
Bill very seldom ever came out. He looked through the Astrodrome.
yeah.
That was right beside his compartment, beside where I sat. Also, the Astrodrome was there. And that was the only thing that Bill could actually ever see out of it. If he got up off his navigation table, stood up and looked at the Astrodrome.
he had to take like star shots to look at the stars and try to pick positions from the various stars and things like that.
He was pretty busy.
Yeah.
Very
I think everybody had their own.
Anytime I helped him, he wasn't having to sleep or anything.
I don't think I've heard any crew ever say they were bored in terms of
No.
the flights could be long, but it wasn't like they were dozing and flipping through magazines with their feet up. And
Well, we had a little discussion once when we were flying near Sweden.
Oh, yeah, wasn't that nice?
Yeah, all the lights
All
on
the
in
lights in
Sweden. We
Sweden.
said, now, if we could just, something could go wrong with the engines, Roy, we could just sort of go over there to Sweden and spend the rest of the time.
Yeah. There's another story here that goes that associates my good friend here. There was a padre on the station, and he just graduated as a priest. And he used to talk to me from time to time, and most of the times he wanted to know what it was like up there. So one day he said to me, he says, is there any chance I could go out with you fellas sometime? I said, if I did, he said, I'd get a better idea of what was going on. So I talked to Roy about it. We talked about it, and Roy said, well, the only thing we can do is take him out on a night we are going out in the dark and coming back in the dark. So that's the way it was left, but as an afterthought, I said, oh, but we've all got parachutes, and he doesn't have a parachute. So Roy, without a moment's hesitation, says, well, if it comes down to that, you can have mine.
Well, that's not the way I heard. I thought you were going to be the hero and give him yours.
No.
Oh,
Anyway, he did go out with us. And Roy said he met every plane after that, didn't he? And he did go out with us, and anyways, as we were lining up to the target, it wasn't this Hick Perry Sounder that was frightened that first time. He come down and he got in that nose. He took one look and he scurried back in with Bill and and Jack, and he never come out again. He didn't like what he seen either.
That same Padre I met going overseas, flying over to England in, I don't know what year it was going to the 419 Squadron reunion at Middleton St. George. It's Teesdale Airport now. Met that same Padre, talked to him, and he went to the reunion with us in Middleton St. George. Same Padre.
How about nerves? Did nerves affect any of you guys? Did you get jangly at any time?
Did me. I fertilized Germany. Not from the bottom end, from the top end. And about 10 of the trips, right alongside of me, there was a 4x4, a little bigger chute that we used to put tinfoil down to jam the German radar. So when we were getting ready to go onto the target, Fred would get rid of whatever supper he had, and down it'd go till I'd fertilize the soil down below. I was all right after I did that.
Told you got seasick all the time.
Yes, you did.
Oh, good. I'm glad these fellas didn't get that way, especially Roy.
Did you ever get jumpy, Lee?
Too busy.
Jack?
I'd be less than honest. I said half the time we were scared to death, but to get especially jumpy, no, I wouldn't think so.
Guess you couldn't help but be keyed up, but
Well, let's put it mildly, yes.
I think he got keyed up going into the target
And relieved coming out.
and relief coming out. You know.
now this may seem like an obvious question, but it ain't necessarily so. Was it, like, because I think you get, returning from a target, you were just as vulnerable in many ways to attacks from night fighters and
More.
such. So, what was the easiest part of the trip, if there was one? Going there or coming back?
Have to ask Roy that.
I don't know.
Young man, I have a question for you. What was the easiest leg of the trip, would you say?
Well, I think it was probably just as you were leaving. If you were over Germany, and it was after you left Germany, that was you felt pretty good because you were on your way back. You know, if you were going into the Ruhr Valley, which was really our toughest area that we bombed, because that was the center of Germany's industrial area. Well, to fly in there, I mean, it was. I always thought about it afterwards when I went to the Toronto exhibition and I saw all the, all the rockets, everything going up, and all the people saying, "Oh, isn't that something really?" I said to myself, "You ain't seen nothing yet," because that's the way it was. The whole sky was just absolutely full of rockets and everything was going up, blowing up all over the place. So, but after you left that, you had a pretty good feeling in your stomach that that you had flown through it anyway. Because flying in, I used to think, well, it was like it was an old. Theirs is not the reason why. Theirs is but to do and die. It was the charge of the light brigade. I used to think about that as we would get lined up to go over a target. So okay, yours is not the reason why. Yours is but to do or die. And that's the way you felt when you went to, but you had to feel, okay, you're not going to die, you're going to make it. And you had to think positively, because if you didn't, you could be in trouble when there was anything kind of serious that was happening.
I'd like to hear from each of you what you thought your worst mission was. Your most difficult, most demanding, most unnerving mission.
For me, it was the firebomb raid in Hamburg, Germany. We set fire to a city about the size of Toronto. And all you could see down there was everything on fire. Well, in that case, that night, there was a plane shot down alongside of us. And I thought, there's no sense they're bailing out because they're going to be roasted when they get down there. So to me, to look at that city in flames the way it was when we finished with it, wasn't a very pretty sight.
That must be a very strange experience, seeing a plane alongside you getting hit in that type of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
It's worse when you saw them blow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was merciful for them to blow up
Yeah.
because
Yes.
down there, there's nowhere they could bail out.
On our last mission, I think, if I remember right, it was either 4 or 5 blew up around us.
Now, is that basically luck of the draw? The RCAF hits the gas tank and it just,
They had their bombs on board. I guess that's why they blew up. Maybe what?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They hadn't dropped their bombs.
Hadn't dropped their bombs when they blew up.
Roy, how about for you? What was the worst mission you had? You remember?
No, I guess the worst one was when I lost the 2 engines, and I was taking off, and I lost 1 engine just as I was taking. I got running down a runway, and I was going 125 miles an hour, and the 1 engine failed. Well, what are you gonna do? There's no room to stop, so I had to take off. I mean, I had the choice. I could have tried to do whatever, but I would have destroyed the plane, and probably the bombs would have. Yeah, I didn't know what. So my alternative was to take off on 3 engines. So we got up, and I talked to Bill and the navigator and said, okay, now we got 3 engines. We're going to have a lower airspeed. Can we get to the target at our particular scheduled time? Can we make it? And he figured out on the navigation and said, yeah, we can do it at a reduced speed, but we'll have to not follow the regular track. We'll make our own track direct. I said, okay, well, let's do it that way. But anyway, we got down going down further just before we left the coast of England, and I lost another engine. Well, the rules are you're supposed to dump your stuff, whatever you're carrying, in the North Sea. But I thought, well, I don't want to do that. I've already come down this far, and I'm still up here. So I contacted him and said, okay, can we make it directly now? And so anyway, we decided to go on. What I said, I said to these guys, I said, okay, this was just before we left the coast of England. I said, okay, well, we're going to go on, but I gotta have the bomb aimer. I have to have a couple of other you guys, but the rest of you other guys can jump out if you want to before we leave England, before we head over the North Sea, you see. So nobody wanted to jump out. They said, no, we're all
Again, I
going
don't remember you asking me.
Maybe you didn't hear me. Anyway, that was
Sorry.
that was kind of funny. Well, it was not funny, but I mean that was kind of interesting. That was one of the interesting things.
That's a tough call because I guess a lot of the responsibility is directly on your shoulders. Can you fly this damn thing on 2 engines?
Well, that was it. So, yeah.
Yeah, but when we got it, he got it there and back, and they asked him if he wanted to press charges against the maintenance crew who did the sloppy maintenance. His answer was, no, we made it there and back, that's all that matters. Because what they did between the linkage inside the plane and onto the motors, they put the wrong cotter pins in the linkage, and the cotter pins fell out with the vibrations of the motor, and he had 2 engines.
We only got 2 engines left. So.
2 engines that worked, but they were sloppy. They should never have done it that way.
I expect they made sure it didn't happen again.
Oh, that's probably right. You're probably right. Yeah.
What was the worst for you, Jack?
I really haven't got any individual trip. One of the worst ones I remember is when we were coming back it was an experimental raid, and we were flying very low, 500 feet over the North Sea.
Oh, yeah.
And this was, Roy says that you were safe once you left the German coast, but there was German fighter planes up above, and they knocked down about 8 or 10 planes that night. I lost my best friend that night.
Yeah, we lost
over the North Sea. The fighters just came down, and of course you were silhouetted against the water, and Roy found a few clouds that we kind of hedged up through the clouds home. We were very fortunate with his skill that we made it, but that's probably one of my recollections.
They were pretty honest at base. They said if you went down in the North Sea, it'd last 10 minutes before you died of hyperthermia. So they were pretty honest about it.
We were almost hitting the top of the waves. It was really rough out there.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, we go along and just scooting along. Yeah, I forgot about that. It was kind of.
Lee, what was the worst for you?
Yeah, that was,
I don't know, they were all the same. I guess the fighter attacks we had, they were always bad, but we were very lucky. I don't think they put a bullet hole in the plane, did they, Roy?
Well, the time with the windshield out and Roy was all cut in the face.
Yeah, but that was flak, that wasn't from a fighter.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. The fighter planes never, and we had two very serious attacks that could have resulted in being shot down, but
What staved off the attacks? Was
it's
it
pilot skill,
Pilot skill
and a
and-
gunner. Like we worked together, Roy and I.
so are you always on the intercom saying, go left and I'll do, were you kind of working together
I
strategically?
tell him to start, and then he tells me what he's doing. And then, but at nighttime, what happens? The fighter overshoots you after he loses contact with you. He can't keep track of you.
So you have some of these bad flights, you get back, you're debriefed. What do you guys do to blow off steam when you get back to
Go to
base?
bed.
Go to
Go and
bed.
have something to eat and go to bed.
Yeah, have something to eat and go to bed. No, I never lost any sleep.
What did you do for fun when you weren't
Hey,
flying?
the kid, come on, the women are sitting here.
But I have the one leave room. Now, I've heard, for instance, a lot of the pubs. Where were you based? You told me and I forgot.
Middleton, St. George,
Which,
just outside of Darlington.
all right.
And there's a little pub at Dinsdale. Did an excellent business.
A lot of the pubs adopted the crews and really looked after you. Did you have a connection with this pub, or is it just?
No, it was just outside the gate, and we all went there. If we had a lot of time, we'd go into Stockton or Darlington, but
Or Newcastle. See, Jack didn't get to Newcastle.
no, I never.
We-
Roy and I was engaged before I went overseas. Roy was married, and we kind of go and leave together, and
we
where
were,
the other ones were
we weren't
out.
we weren't looking for girls. We'll put it that.
My buddy and
That's
I,
the truth.
the other gunner, we had motorcycles. So we cruised all
So
over.
did Fred.
I don't remember Fred and his motorcycle. We
Yeah, I
probably
had
were
one.
going
I
in
had
a
a
different
Rudge.
direction. But Moon and I had motorcycles, and we went all over England with them.
Did you socialize together as a group at all?
Not really.
Except at the end. We just had to socialize at the end.
I'm sitting here with you guys 60 years later. You seem to still know each other. Why is that?
Because we shared an experience.
But you didn't talk a lot about what your nerves were when you came down from a mission. You often went out and socialized separately, and yet you connected and held on to that bond. Can anybody
But
explain
you
that?
understand, when we come back after debriefing, we went and all went to supper. It was one of the better meals that they fed us. And at the end, it was the best meal they fed us, because when we took off, they gave us bacon or spam and eggs and chips, and then they got to the point where we could only get it when we come back. Remember that?
They had fewer people to feed.
Unless we were very fortunate and got diverted to an American drone and kind of ours was fogged in.
That
Those
was
were
good.
glory days. Then we would eat well.
So I understand the Americans fed you first class.
Oh, I remember
Boy,
one time,
gotta say-
Blake, we landed at this American drone because our drone was fogged in, And I went into the mess hall and the pretty little whack, an American whack, said, "What would you like? Would you like a steak or would you like bacon and eggs?" And I jokingly said, "Oh, I'd love some eggs on top of a steak." And she says, "Fine." I've never heard of it before. Had a glass of milk to drink too. But anyhow,
Roy got us into trouble one time, and we how'd that all come about, Roy?
I don't know. I don't really remember this one.
Yeah.
Well, be careful, Lee.
But you know, again, we did not. When you say socialized, remember Fred was an officer, and Roy and Bill were officers, so they ate a different mess than we did, and. Jack, he had a girlfriend.
I did like
home.
hell.
At home.
Anyhow, she kept
That's
sending
right.
him these beautiful parcels from back here
Oh,
in
now
Canada.
you're talking about my
I'm talking
sweetheart
about
that-
your wife, Jean.
Oh, that sent
Yeah.
me the parcels,
Yeah,
yes.
she sent him
Okay.
parcels, and he used to sit there with his parcels with all this great food, and sit there and moon about his girlfriend. Well, the other guy and I, Forbes Moon and I, of course, we either went to Darlington or Newcastle or someplace. But remember, there's a limited amount of money you can spend too, so you're pretty well curtailed. And
When we first landed in England, we went into a room with a British officer, and we got a lecture of how the officers were not to associate with the ranks. Well, when we walked out of that room, Roy says, "Bullshit."
did you guys go to the Royal Naval College down in Bournemouth?
I
Poor
don't-
old Moon and I had to go to the Naval College down in Bournemouth.
No.
And this is when we were in Bournemouth. And we got in all kinds of trouble for being disrespectful to the naval officers and that. We didn't salute anybody.
You guys were all in Bournemouth at one point or another, I assume.
I wasn't.
Did any of you experience the Focke-Wulfs or something coming in low
Yes,
on
yes.
Strafen?
Yes, I
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Can you tell me anything about those?
That another fellow and I, when we were going out a Sunday afternoon, we were going to go out and tour the city. So we got on this bus, and the bus went up to the top of a hill, and as it got up to the top of a hill, the sirens started to go. So another fellow and I stayed in the bus, and the bus driver, and a woman got out when she had a 5 or 6 year old little girl. She ran across the street, left the kid in the middle of the street, and headed into the shelter, and the kid's in the middle of the street, "Mommy, Mommy." The fighter plane or the plane came in with one bomb, went over to the top of the bus and dropped it right behind us. And the kid, well, 2 Canadians too stupid to run, I guess, but we just stood there. Then we got out and went and took the kid over to the air raid shelter. But when I told that at the school, I said, "Any of you young ladies would ever desert your child?" "No, never. You don't know what you would do." And she was so frightened that she just left her kid standing there.
Oh, Lord.
But we were in Bournemouth at various times when the German fighter planes or whatever they were came over with their and just strafed. You know, they came over and strafed the frontal area of Bournemouth there.
You can tell that they don't know anything about the German
They were
fighter.
ME 109s, I can tell you that right now.
Focke-Wulf 190's the one that Lord Haw used to send over. What's his name, Joyce?
Yeah, William Joyce.
Yeah, he used to talk on the radio and tell us that he was sending his Focke-Wulf 190s in on Bournemouth.
But on Sunday afternoon, the British had a Sunday afternoon, the musicians would play in their park. It was nice to sit there in the grass and listen to them. But that's when the buggers would come over and strafe the...
He made fun of us, Lord Haw. Said, "You Canadians have just arrived in Bournemouth. I've got a little tribute coming over for you in a few minutes." Yeah, he did that a number of times.
Now, I got a couple of questions here. again, I'm sorry, I'm a bit weak on names. Now on the crew, there's you guys, and there was Jarvis and Forbes.
Forbes Moon.
Forbes Moon.
Forbes Moon.
Yeah.
So just isn't there 7 on them?
Yeah, and we had Jack
Jack
Ellis. Jack Ellis was an English engineer.
Well, let's start with Jarvis and Forbes Moon. Can you guys give me any memories, any stories of those guys?
These are all his sons.
I'm aware of that.
Sorry.
No, I'm not scolding. I'm saying, especially because they're here and because I know nothing about them. Can you guys tell me anything about them?
Only that Bill was good at his job.
He was a great guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you how good he was at his job. We picked up a wind for whatever reason we didn't know about. We picked up a wind and it took us by the target. What would you say, an hour by the target, Pastor?
Where was this?
Yeah, and then when we came back, we ran out of gas and we had to land on the coast.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know how long.
Well, I don't think it was no hour, but anyhow.
It was a long time past the target.
That's time
But
we
again,
went.
it comes to the navigator. He's gotta come up with what happened. And you gotta remember, this is at night, and this is, only sees a few stars.
Was he using that? Does he take star shots with a sextant? Or
Yeah, I
does
guess that's what it does. I don't know. I wasn't a navigator. I don't know what he did up there, but he stood there with something in his hands. I guess it was a six.
Very seldom he stood in the Astrodrome when he was navigating. Bill was an excellent navigator. I helped him occasionally if he wanted a reciprocal course back to base to make sure we were flying on line. He'd pass me a note. I'd get a reciprocal course, pass him a note. But he did very seldom ever used the sextant. But we worked kind of together back and forth. If he needed any help, he didn't need help too often. He was an excellent navigator. Bill was a very quiet person in the air. Probably I had a good rapport with him. Even after the war, we kept in very close touch. What can I say about him?
Well, you know, on a trip like going across, not just those trips that we took going down to the Ruhr Valley and into France and in that area, but we went up north when we were going up to Norway, we see. We bombed the German submarine pens up in Bergen, Norway. Well, that was a long trip across the North Sea, you see. And so you needed an excellent navigator to get you there and that sort of. In those kind of trips, I mean, that's where a navigator really was terribly important. And of course, it was important for him to get you home too.
Yes.
Stettin was another trip that took us a long, long time and took us way up, down through between Norway and Sweden. I don't know, did we cross Denmark?
Yeah, we crossed Denmark.
Yeah, that was Port of Berlin.
Yeah, that's a long way, and now you got to come back from there, and it's a long way. And other than Stuttgart, way down in the south, where you got to come back from so long away.
We run into a violent thunderstorm when we crossed Denmark.
I'm going to ask some questions here as I'm going to start to wrap up. I'm going to start with you, mister. What is your most vivid memory of the war? If I were to ask you for one, most vivid memory of a person or of an event, if you came up with one, is there anything that jumps to mind that kind of captures what the war years were like for you?
My vivid memory was the time those wheels landed on that ground for the last trip. That was mine.
Thank you for reminding me. How did it feel? I mean, I've heard various stories. You guys flew 32 missions, as I recall.
32.
Which seems like a slightly longer
No, I
journey.
did more, but
How does it feel when you're about to take off and or do you know it's your last mission?
yeah, they told us.
How does that feel? Is that spooky? Is it like bad luck, or is it, anybody have any memories of that?
Yeah, I was just happy to get it over with.
Exactly.
So, yeah, this is the last one. I said, okay, we're coming back. It'll be our last one. Hooray.
No extra nerves because it was the last one, and
No, not at all. Just like happiness, to be quite truthful. But At least those are my feelings. And
How about you, Jack?
You mean personal experiences or my feelings on it? I suppose my worst experience of the war is when I lost my brother and I lost my best friend. Was shot down the night that we were coming back on the lowest sweep. I mentioned to you that a lot of planes were shot down. I suppose those are what sticks in my mind mostly. The trips, over the years, I pretty well blanked them out of my mind. I don't really think about them a great deal.
But your brother stays with you.
Very much so.
Do you know much about the mission he was on when he was hit?
Oh yeah, I have his logbook. I get a little.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
How did you be able to get his logbook, Jack?
When he was killed, it was sent home.
Oh, they
To my
recovered it,
father.
and
Yes.
did they?
Well, we didn't take our logbooks with us when we were flying. They were with them.
Oh, that's
My,
true.
my
That's
brother
true.
was
Yeah.
transferred to Pathfinders.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, he's Pathfinder.
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, geez, that's. What squadron do you remember?
No, I have it at home. It was an English squadron.
I know a bunch of Pathfinders, and that was
Right.
a damn tough job.
Yeah. He only did 3 trips as a Pathfinder. He got hit in the 3rd trip.
Well, he was doing.
I suppose that was one of the things I remember vividly. He was shot down over Saint Nazaire, the bullpens in France. And we were scheduled to go to Saint Nazaire. We were briefed and we were going to take off. And I was praying that we didn't. And we were scrubbed for some reason. We never did take off on that trip.
Life is strange.
No matter how skillful this guy was, it's 50% skill and 50% goddamn luck.
The odds were lousy in Bomber Command. Roy, what is the one that stands out in your memory the most? Is there one? I guess not the one. What am I saying? A memory. The mission was the 2 engines. Is there any particular memory that stands out or immediately springs to mind as being most evocative? This question comes from talking to my grandfather, who told me of a very vivid story in London, and it's not a nice story, but it's something that during a bombing raid, and it involved a bunch of people around him being killed, and I have a piece of shrapnel landed at his feet, and I still have that, and it's still goddamn razor sharp 60 years later, and that was to him, that captured the kind of emotion of a lot of what he went through. Is there anything like that?
well, not quite in that same sense, but I mean, it was in a little bit like what you were just saying. It was when I got when I blew up my windshield and a piece of shrapnel hit me, I automatically ducked like that, you know, and the shrapnel hit me on the head like that. But having a hard head and having turned my head, I guess this way, it glanced off and went up there. So it didn't, all it did was give me a nice big cut across there, you know. But bounced off my head, and I thought, hey man, all you had to be is up like that and that would have hit you right square in the eye. So I guess that was kind of what that was about as close as I came to having something that kind of upset me a little bit. But
You had the shrapnel, didn't you? Didn't you get that
yeah,
piece?
I had a piece of it for a long time, and then somehow I lost it, and I carried it as my good luck piece for some time.
But also, Roy, the glass shattered
No, that's
and hit
right.
you in the face, and
Yeah, it hit
it was
me in the-
bleeding all
Yeah,
little,
my eyes were all filled
pock
with
marks
tears.
and bleeding all up. It looked a lot worse, believe me,
Yeah.
than it was,
Yeah.
fortunately.
I can't imagine a windshield blowing up in my face at 250 miles an hour or something at probably 10,000 feet.
Yeah, it was 120 miles, 135 miles an hour. The powder all hit me in the eyes too. The powder on it came through. But anyway,
Lee, how about you? Is there one thing that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, just one thing that irritates me about the war is we flew demoralization raids, which you're aware of.
Can you explain it to the camera, though?
Demoralization raid was where we attacked a city and the population of that city. That didn't bother me because it was an order, and we followed orders, and there was purposes behind it. The demoralization raid we flew on Kiel was at the time that Hitler they had bombed Hitler, and we were hoping that by bombing Kiel and the places where the Navy lived in Kiel, that we could get the German Navy to riot or capitulate. That was the purpose behind the raid. And then we have these people who produced a movie not too long ago, which we have a guy standing in Stettin saying he's sorry for the demoralization raid we flew on Stuttgart. I don't know why anybody in the Air Force would be sorry for anything he did. Two reasons. It was always explained to us why we went somewhere. If you didn't want to go, you didn't have to go. Nobody twisted your arm to go. And secondly, it was part of his job. So why did he stand in Stuttgart and ask the people of Stuttgart to forgive him for bombing Stuttgart?
I can probably answer that question. That would be the valor and the horror.
Yes, it is.
And those guys, how should I say, manipulated their material to suit their purpose.
But it bothers me. It always bothers me.
It bothers pretty much everybody I find in the service. They just hate that series because they manipulate the situations and the facts to have it present and come across in a certain way. And it really is an unhappy thing that it even exists.
But again, I say that anybody that flew on those raids, we were told before we went, contrary to what they said. My logbook is all the demoralization raids are recorded. It's all signed by the squadron commander. So there weren't a secret. There was nothing secret about what we did.
That valor and the part where the Frenchman's talking about the turret being blown off.
Yeah.
What a crock that is. You couldn't fly the damn plane if that turret was blown off because all your controls are back there. But they stand there giving all this big spiel about...
No, it's a sorry episode in Canadian documentaries, I'm afraid. I'm going to pause for a moment, change the tape, and then I got the final questions, then you guys are off the hook. You've done a great job. It's only about another 5 minutes, but I got to swap tapes. You want to stretch your legs. You want to... Don't look at your watch, you dirty dog. I'm just kidding. Jeez Louise. I've been good to you.
You're absolutely.
The same thing for myself, but I can't. All right. I'm going to ask just one or two wrap-up questions of each of you individually again. I'm going to zoom in on you. It's real simple. And then if I've not covered anything you really want to say, it's open season, all right? So I'm just going to work from Lee back across, all right? Real simple. And the question, Lee, is this. You were one of the younger chaps who got in, right? Do you think your service years changed you? Did they mature you? And if so, can you say how? You were, what, 17 when you got in?
Well, I was actually, before I was 18, I was in the service, and I don't know what they did for me, if anything. After I got out of the service, I joined the American Army.
And I heard you said you were in counterintelligence.
Yes.
I
have some very vivid experiences there that have nothing to do, because one was in the ground and the other was in the air. And the last mission I flew in, on an aircraft, was dropping agents behind the North Korean lines in Korea and the Chinese lines. That's the last time I flew. It was in a DC-3 with Greek pilots.
Did you make a career of the service?
No,
But you stayed in for a while.
4 years on top of the Air Force.
Did you find it tough getting back to civilian life when you got out?
No.
And if you had the chance in 100 years' time to speak to your grandchildren's grandchildren, is there anything you'd want them to know about what that time of the world meant to you, about what the way the world looked to you, how you felt or why you did what you did?
I wouldn't even try to explain to them, because the world has so much changed now. Trying to tell my own kids what it was like to be a kid in an aircraft with a bunch of old guys. Yeah, I called
Were you
Roy.
in a different airplane than us?
I called Roy the old man. And they were always giving me advice.
What can you ask him, right?
Yeah, Roy looked after me pretty good. Carry me home a couple of times, Roy.
Attaboy. That's... How about you, Jack? First of all, when you got out, looking back, do you think the service years, your service years, did they change you in any way?
I think they gave me a greater appreciation of life. But outside of that, I don't think they changed me a great deal.
Did you have any difficulty settling back into Civvy Street?
Oh yes, I had a great deal of difficulty trying to find an occupation I wanted. Tried a couple of jobs that didn't really work out, and had an opportunity of going into the insurance business, which I took on a temporary basis, thought that it might be a career, and I stayed there for 35 years, so I guess I found my niche in life and carried on. I was fortunate. I got a very lovely wife who supported me, and I've had a happy life.
And is there anything you want your great-grandchildren's grandchildren to know about that time of the world, or about what you did, or just the way the world looked? Now, let me interrupt here to give you another, for instance. A good friend of my grandfather's in London, worked in London during the war, and I was interviewing him about 2 years ago. And I said, it must have been really interesting in London, I mean, the bombing raids and all the stuff. He said, well, his big memory of London, 1944, is how quiet it was. He said, it was a lot quieter. That stunned me. In the middle of the war, I mean, anti-aircraft, and there were regular bombing raids. He said, yeah, but it was really quiet. There were no cars. And so things like that really struck me, that it was a different world, an entirely different world. Anyway, I digress. This is not my interview, as you may realize, it's really yours. Is there anything you'd want your grandchildren to know about what that time of the world looked like, how it felt?
I don't really think so, Blake.
Are you glad you did it?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I wasn't glad to go into the service. I went into the service because I thought it was part of my duty and responsibility to be a good Canadian. I didn't go in to be a hero or anything. Am I glad I did it? I suppose I'm glad I played my part in it, but outside of that, I wouldn't say it made me overly happy.
Fair enough. Roy.
Yeah.
It's your turn, sir. Now you were all grown up. You were the oldest. You were granddad of the crew.
That's right.
Having said that, though, do you think your service years changed you very much? Doing those, whatever, I guess you did about 4 years of service.
No, I don't think it changed me a great deal, because I knew that it was something that had to be done, and kind of that's the way I've lived my life. I mean, if there's something comes along and it has to be done, I go ahead and do it. And really, that's all that I did in the war, was just do that. So I would say that it really didn't change me.
I think that would be a huge asset when you had to fly into a wall of flak. Well, you gotta do it, what the hell, might as well. So you didn't have a really much opportunity or much need to think about it. You just had to be
That's
done.
right. But sometimes when you go to, like in the Depression, and so I lived through the Depression, and I was young. I was riding freight trains. I was, I was on my own. I went across the country, hitchhiking and riding freight trains and all that sort of thing. And it was, my experience was a little different than a lot of the other people who had everything, so. But I just really felt that I knew what it was like to have a lot of problems. And so these kind of erase the problems when the war was settled and all that sort of thing. There were jobs available later on, you know. I guess probably that's about.
Did you find any difficulty getting back to civilian life after the service?
Well, I had a little difficulty getting back into it, finding a decent sort of a job and that sort of thing, but of course that was up to me, you know, as an individual. And I don't think the service really had anything to do with it, except it, it made me realize that there was a lot of things in life that were more serious than just playing football and, you know, and boxing and wrestling and all that sort of thing. So, and I met, you know, like the guys like Bill Jarvis and, you know, these guys here, you know, and you met some great friends and that sort of thing, guys that worked together with you, so you knew that there was something in the world just besides yourself. You had other people who worked with you and were good people, so I guess that gives you some good thinking points, you know, towards life in general.
Is there anything you'd want your grandchildren to know about that time of the world? Even the Depression years, even any of the things you went through back then?
No, I really didn't get that question.
If you had the chance in, say, 100 years' time to speak to your grandchildren's grandchildren about what that time in the world was like and what was significant to you, what had impact on you, is there anything you would want them to know in particular?
I can't say that there was anything in particular I'd say just live your own life and live it the best way that you can, you know, and try to be decent with people and treat them like you'd like to be treated yourself, and that's really the way that I've kind of taken a look at life, and that's about it, I would say.
Thank you very much. Fred.
Yeah, big mouth.
Mr. Big Mouth.
Mr. Big Mouth.
Did your service years change you at all?
It did me because I was a lousy father, too strict. I took my military training in child rearing, and you did as you're told, and you didn't ask any questions. That was my biggest regret, taking that. But as far as my life is concerned, I got a fairly decent job, and that's what I stuck to right up until I retired. Your last question, what would you tell? For Christ's sake, stop fighting over religion.
Yeah.
Would be my biggest thing. You want to be religious? Fine, but don't fight over it. Like what's going on right now. It's tragic right now to see the way this world is turned in the name of religion. I mean, it's in the name of power. It has nothing whatsoever to do with religion. And if I had anything to do with the great-grandchildren, I'd say, it's not worth it. Realize that this planet is the only home we have. Look after it and enjoy it. Linda and I have gone coast to coast. There's so many nice things in Canada. Beautiful things you can see and enjoy. So what the hell are you fighting about? What are you squabbling? And even down to a family level. Why are you fighting at the family level when there's so many, like Roy said, there's so many nice things to enjoy? I don't really think that message is going to go across. It's like I've said before, to change our attitude is like handing a paddle to the guy in the Titanic and telling him to steer away from that iceberg. It's just impossible. Because that's the way we are. For some reason or other, that's the way we're made, and I have no idea. I have no answers as to why we take that attitude.
I read a lovely quote this morning that I wish I could put into more action. It was from Gandhi, and it was, live every day as though it were your last, and live as though you're going to last forever. Well, that's pretty good if you can keep your eye on the ball right in front of you and just enjoy the day for what it is, but assume it's going to go on forever. If you could play both ends at the same time, that'd be pretty nice to do.
Well, Linda picked up a quote on the email. A young class asked the students to say what was the 7 wonders of the world. Eyesight, hearing, all these senses that we have, 7 senses that we have, are important. We take them for granted, but they shouldn't. We should appreciate them.
You guys have been terrific, and you've let me take up all kinds of your time. And I know
Where
I've
do you
kept
send
Jack
it?
from his whiskey.
Where
He's
do you
kept me from mine.
We'll send you our bill.
Is there anything that I haven't talked about you guys wanted to say, you wanted to add? I'm sure I've talked you way the hell out, but you've been terrific. Is there anything else, though, that you'd like to say? I want to thank you, not only for what you guys did for me, being able to grow up as a selfish, self-centered baby boomer who didn't know what he had the good gracious luck to inherit. I am endlessly appreciative of what the generation that preceded me did for me that I didn't begin to understand until I started talking to you guys 6 years ago. And I know it's no great party to come here and sit and talk to me, but I think it's real important what you did. I think it's real important what you did then. I think it's important that you came and talked about it today. And so you have my undying friendship, and I really appreciate your time. And if I can ever do anything for you in return, I hope you will not hesitate to contact me. And thank you, sir.
Do you make a video of this?
Yes, I make a video of this. What I'll do, does anybody else want to say anything? If not, I'll shut off the camera so I don't have to hear myself talk, which really nauseates both Noel and I.
He hadn't said a word.
No, that's...
Nodding, smirking.